Welcome back, everyone, to Pontus Fathom Hobbies. This is episode 69 of our Pontus Fathom podcast. I want to do something a little different today. I've got a bunch of stuff going on and have been quite busy with work and getting ready for a scuba diving trip. So I kind of wanted to just do something a little off the cuff. I am practicing, what's that Japanese art of having stacks of books around the house? There are so many stacks of books around my place right now. I thought I'd walk you guys through some of the stuff that's around. I know this is kind of a book channel. I also wanted to show you this thing I put together from some books I drew as a kid and some of that comic book influence. So I'm going to start out with a stack of books. Really what it's kind of about is I've been watching some collectors and physical media people, and I think books are always a strange thing because a lot of people read books digitally. You guys, leave me a comment down below. Do you read your books physically, or are you kind of digital book readers? I've never really made... I will read digitally, but I think mostly I will read a physical book. And it kind of got me down that wormhole of... or the rabbit hole of the physical media topic that's out there. There's a lot of people talking about physical CDs are making a comeback, or collections of DVDs, Blu-rays, and actual physical books. Like, having that physical media is such a huge statement given the way things are in the world. And I thought about creating your own physical media, something that we do at Pontus Fathom Press as well. So I thought I'd kind of go down some of that and just kind of walk you guys through a few things. So what I'm really going to do something real simple today. Just like take a tour of some physical media and talk about what's around my tabletop, but then kind of get into some of that history of drawing and comics that there's a side that we explore sometimes on the channel. And then I'm going to walk you through this Enforcer Comics, which is put together from drawings that I did from 1980 to 2006. I would do a comic book every year, a little small fold out. I'd cut a piece of paper in half, and then I'd fold it in half, and I would draw. I'd put the folded pieces together to make a booklet. And I did this every year from like 6th grade through uni and beyond. So I want to walk you through that kind of history. It's a kind of a cool art project. If you go back, you can even go back and collect some of the stuff that you've done. But let's go kind of through a stack of books I've got. This is the stack of books by my coffee table. We've got Liz Green's Saturn. It's come up on the podcast enough. This is a great book on just looking at a astrological look at Saturn, but really from the point of view of a psychological astrology. It is definitely a Jungian style in which Saturn is not seen as the malefic, but it's seen more as a planet of karma, challenge, discipline, growth. So yeah, pretty fantastic book. This is a genealogy that I've put together. It's a genealogy that goes deep into family history, but this is one of those projects that you guys could put together. These days, printing a book is so easy. You can put together a genealogy quite simply. Next up here, I've got a project that I haven't talked much about on the channel yet, but this is one of the volumes of a series of books that I am going to be that I'm working on, and this is volume 4 of an alchemical saga, drawing again on the cover. So there's a theme of drawing here. Here's a Robert E. Howard Conan book that happens to be there. Star Wars was always a big hit. Star Wars. This is Star Wars trading cards. Pretty fantastic book. Next up, astrological timing, the influence of Lucifer and Ahriman. Here's a great one. This is August Moldenhauer and Julia Treib's Towards Ethics of an Analysand, talking about Lacan and lay analysis. There's also some Lacanian drawings in this that kind of call out to Xenodemonicon of Bensamagos, Head for Salome, Elizabethan Demonology, by Thomas Spalding, Dark Spirit House by Otsu Grail, and Princess of Ayutthaya by Otsu Grail. You've got On Nietzsche by Bataille. It's a good collection. This is an early edition of my Dead Sons 11 and Locksmith of Quanta. And then here we've got The Essential Solitude, The Letters of H.P. Lovecraft and August Derleth, 1926 to 1931. This is a great deep dive into Lovecraft's early writing. I think it's very insightful. And especially, coming from our channel, if you guys want to go out and check out our bookstore, we've got the Cat Journals out of Lovecraft's Providence that helps to support our channel here. And it is definitely a classic of Lovecraftian lore put together. We've also got the Artificial Psychoanalysis of Desiring Machines, where machines are at the borderline of not only the rise of artificial general intelligence, but also steps that seem to be automating the way everyone walks around with a cell phone. There's an automation there too. And then finally, Alchemy and Anthroposophy in the Dune Saga, a Jungian deep dive into Frank Herbert's works, looking at through the lens of his influences from Jung, some of the observations that seem to have anthroposophical origins, and also his influences by thinkers like Samuel Butler, who influenced his idea of the Butlerian jihad against machines, and also things like the Bene Gesserit and the Bene Tleilax. Okay, so this is some stack of books that just happens to be here. I'll walk you guys through this. Let's talk about some comic books. So I've got on the table some things that I used to read from the 70s and 80s, let's say. I was a big fan of Spider-Man first, I think. There was a time when I used to read Spider-Man comics, Iron Man comics. It's a huge, huge time. Then I kind of discovered things like the X-Men and the Fantastic Four in the 80s. And that was a great time. John Byrne definitely was a huge influential artist there. So I picked up this Fantastic Four John Byrne. I don't want to say that I want to be a completist collector, but this was sort of one of those indicative pieces of work that I thought Fantastic Four really, and especially John Byrne's retooling of the Fantastic Four, was a huge influence on me. I can remember, and I've got some podcasts where I walk through these, and if you guys are interested in more of this kind of content, I can leave a comment below. I'm happy to walk through this, but I can remember seeing this series of Terrax the Tamer and Galactus versus this book, In Search of Galactus. I remember a friend of mine and I'd ride my bike over to his house. We'd look at these comics. This was a huge influence in my love for the medium. And like I said, though, early in the 70s, super influenced by Spider-Man, Batman, things like that. But then as we got the 80s, went into the 90s, started to get into things like some of the anime things like Ghost in the Shell. At that time in the 80s also there was Akira. Maybe this was 90s by then. Akira was a huge hit at the time. This one I picked up recently in Japan. This stuff was fantastic. And also I think the sci-fi complexity of it, really has things like Stranger Things wouldn't exist without things like Akira. A lot of those tropes are in there. But then I also kind of got into, quite interested in Frank Miller period, like that Frank Miller time of Daredevil. I was right front seat of those issues, and things like Daredevil, just like Batman Year One, but Daredevil. Daredevil's work by Frank Miller was amazing, and even the David Mazzucchelli work was good, just like Batman Year One. Huge influence there. Other things I've got on the table is Miller's Elektra Lives Again. This is a huge influence. I think I always had the urge to create and to draw some of these things, right? Some of this work was just fantastic. I picked this one up secondhand, but this was one of the ones I bought back in the day. That's not my original copy, but and of course there was the Batman Frank Miller works too. This is a black and white version of Batman Year One. Dark Knight Returns. I kind of got this edition because I just like the line work. And I think some of that influence went on from there into some of the things from the later times that we can take a look at. Maybe I'll jump into this Enforcer comics. So this was this comics that I had worked on. Maybe I'll zoom this in a bit. These were sort of handmade comics that I made, little zines. I made this little mini series of comics. We used to make them in school, and we passed them out among the students. My first one I made, it was kind of in the time around that time of I said Enforcer comics started back in the 6th grade. Several of my friends and I would spend time drawing and creating characters. They were the little battleships and secret base drawings of Mark and Greg. Willie and I would draw monsters and battle scenes. One friend created the hero Radion. I created Omega, the living robot. I made Star Trek and X-Men comics, of course. I created Enforcer. So this is the Enforcer comics. But the tradition, I'd only create one comic a year. And as years passed, it became an annual tradition to try to produce something. Even if it wasn't really a comic. Soon the Enforcer comics began to change. So I went to uni around issue 8. And then new characters emerged, and as Enforcer transformed into other kind of versions of the Enforcer, like the Entomoid or the Informer or the Infomage, I started to weave in other characters, whether it's Boba Fett, Silver Surfer, vampires, Galactus. I even wore the Enforcer armor in issue 18, and then returned to some of that comic book influences like Daredevil, graffiti photos, things like Adam Avocado from Bike Messenger days, paintings, Mjolnir, Stormbringer. Last year I returned the comic to the Enforcer name. It's just the itch to write, but this is the culmination of 26 years of doodling and persistence. And then it says, see you in 52 years. I did not continue the series, but here's the cover of the first issue of the Enforcer. You can kind of see it's got a flaming D&D kind of sword. It's an Iron Man kind of analog. It's kind of a pencil drawing that was done on... I think I would make the covers out of construction paper, colored construction paper. And the inside, I just used any paper that I had. But you see that there's a scientist who's also... He's really like an Iron Man. He's basically Iron Man. And he's got his suit of armor. He's got his interceptor fighter. There's a fleet of aliens that attack him. They blow out his lower panel, and he hits impulse. And he races forward at super high speeds. Let me zoom this in a little bit more. Races forward at high speeds. Finally, he cools off. And one of the globe ships, when he swims to shore, is there. And he finds the aliens are shapeshifters. So the alien, at first, he has a sword and says, Vak, Vak. Then the creature changes into a tank. And the tank fire. One of the things I always liked about Iron Man comics is the armor would always take damage, right? The armor would always be taking some damage. So I'd have this drawing of the armor always getting destroyed. So the monster ends up eating him. And he fights his way out. And a lot of these were lifted from kind of other comic books I had read, but just something I probably thought was cool. And then you've got the Enforcer swims down to his ship, restarts his ship, his armor's all banged up, gets back to his lab, and then ends with the Enforcer's back. That's episode 1. Then it kind of goes on like this in each issue. The different issues start to explore different parts of the Enforcer, sort of drama, we'll call it. He gets a new ship. This time it's captured by, again, this is a ripoff, Computrex. I think was something from, maybe it was a Micronauts comics. I think this is an actual scene I lifted from a Iron Man comic. Bit of a mushroom cloud here. There's also all the little tricks of the armor. So he has a super villain. I think this might have been Iron Man versus Titanium Man, something like this. Then I did the cutaway of the spacecraft. And yeah, so then it kind of goes on. So then there's all, each year I'd kind of come up with a new take on this. And then the drawing doesn't really get any better. It just starts to change into something a bit more composition, I'd say. But just similar themes, just to draw an episode. This one has a big explosion in it. Must be the 80s, right, with the movies. This is the stealth armor. Again, the ship gets destroyed as usual. Now he's fighting against Computron and Traxxon, 2 new villains. I think I was into Rom Space Knight at this time, and I kind of lifted some of the design cues from Rom Space Knight. He has a battle axe at this time. And this is very influenced by D&D and other sci-fi stuff. So then I think he pulls the plug on the advancing AI as it materializes like holodeck style out of the computer. I think this is probably my most comic book drawn one, 1986. I lifted this from a battle in Spider-Man between the Fixer and Wrecking Ball or something like this. They were 2 villains of Spider-Man, I think. I can't really remember, but one had a giant wrecking ball which he hits into the wall, and then he punches the ball back out of the building. And then at the end, I always loved those scenes when like Benjamin Grimm, the Thing, or the Hulk would throw like a huge truck or something like this. So I kind of worked one of those scenes in. I think I went off to university, and then I didn't have much time to draw at that time. So what I did is I put together a collage version of it. So now I made this collage version. I just took some magazine cutouts at the time and did a collage. Then I think on the next year, I kind of did a Freudian kind of psychological one where I was thinking maybe it's time to put the comic to bed. And so I have the Enforcer sort of fall into a grave during a thunderstorm. This is pretty storyboard-esque. And I left it as a cliffhanger. I didn't know where to end it. Then the next year, I really didn't know what to do with it, so I just kind of made it super abstract and started bringing in some esoterica themes, like the grave has an Ankh on it, there's pyramids, there's the sun and the moon. He comes off the page, and then go back to the collage style a bit. So this mirror phase. We've got the scream there. And then I kind of went into this. I was really into pen and ink at this time, so I did a pen and ink version of it, and I just sketched out a quick comic book with a little bit of Iron Man, Machine Man, and Rom Space Knight collage, and Darth Vader and things like that. So I made this one where he was Entomoid, the exterminator. So there's giant bugs attacking the city. These police get attacked by the giant bugs. And then Entomoid comes out, and he basically just fights bugs. It's like Starship Troopers. The year after, I turned him into a cybernaut. Maybe I was influenced by William Gibson's Neuromancer at this time, so I kind of did a cyberspace homage. And I kind of did a retrospective of all the comics. Redid some of the drawings. I emerge from the history, from the archaeology of the texts, and stand above the liquid data architectures, separating data links, moving high above the info plane, less neurocongestion, flying free of personata and characteristica, sleek and nodular, pristine void, 0 hour byway, no traffic, onto the next grid. I even footnoted my old issues. So this is pretty funny. This one is an early, I think this was made on a Macintosh using the Paint program. And it's actually like an early digital art kind of version of one. I've got these digital kind of versions. Also some collage, some bike messenger stories. I've been working on a bike messenger story called something about Adam Avocado and the second single Infinite Gear bicycle. So it was sort of a William Gibson-esque campier version of that. I had been reading some of that William Gibson stuff. I was a bike messenger. Another year goes by. This one I decided just to do some quick little paintings. So I brought back Infomage, the cybernetic endomorph, and just made like kind of finger paint style. I think probably my kids were born at this time, so I was probably having finger paints around. So I just did my own finger paints. No, it was still earlier than that. It's before the kids were born. It was just a painterly moment. That's all it was. Some more collage. Yeah, then I did some miniature painting, miniature photos. I've got Boba Fett photoed here. So this is the strangest plot of all. So a fly comes into a vampire's room. The fly hits the oracular water, and then the vampire recoils at the sight of Boba Fett. And you get this image of the angels coming down. Boba Fett standing inside of an old stereo case as a figure. There's a painting in the background. Old paintings. Then I've got Boba Fett. Actually, he's standing on Heidegger's Being in Time right here. This is in Boston. It's in south end of Boston, not Southie, but the south end of Boston. Then I've got this Silver Surfer action figure. It's actually on a kind of Guatemalan style print dress, and the Silver Surfer's flying along, and Boba Fett's looking at the Silver Surfer. He's on the radiator. Angled him here. Then this, I actually drew this on the negative. So I drew this kind of on the negative of the photo, and I actually froze Boba Fett in a block of green food colored ice to make him frozen in carbonite. You can see there's a cheese grater actually here in the background for some reason. It must have been shot in the kitchen. So I've got Boba Fett frozen in carbonite, and then something weird with the vampires. Some robots looking on, and the vampires bites the neck of one of these robots. That's it. Then there's the part 2 of the story. Boba Fett and Silver Surfer again. Boba Fett is back in the Slave One. This is kind of a collage one, but I kind of laid it out like comic book style. Got the action figure out again here. He's going to challenge Boba Fett to a duel out in space. So he leaves the ship, and they're sort of out in space together. I actually have a Boba Fett floppy disk here that maybe had the files on it. So then I continue the story. This was shot in the kitchen of that same apartment in Boston in the South End. If Boba Fett met Silver Surfer in combat, what would be the outcome? What are the whys and hows of it? Would Galactus intervene for the nonce? Bingo, perhaps, the non-combat tiff twixt two. Truce throw true, metal song of Soul Yaman. A bumblebee galaxy now smaller. Home as sweet as you eat it. 007 time. Bye-bye heaven. Hello, new heaven. Planet 11. Pros epose. The base battle in space. To here we return. They seek the usual answers to the questions of power. Pity is far now. So you got the Boba Fett and Silver Surfer facing off. And then Galactus does arrive. Right? Galactus arrives. And Boba Fett basically asks to become Galactus's herald instead of the Silver Surfer. So he sets Silver Surfer free, and then Boba Fett is reborn as the Herald of Galactus. This is the Galactica episode. Weird. Very funny. Okay, now we're at the year 2000. This is a Todd McFarlane Spawn, Cyber Spawn kind of miniature figure I had. So I sort of worked out this thing where I green screened some 3D art I did, planning the new book, and it's sort of wearing the Spawn armor. So it's like kind of putting on the armor, like Iron Man style, and then going off into this 3D rendered using Bryce. I think I used Bryce at the time. It's my old painting. This is also an apartment now we're in Southie. This is an apartment in Southie. Is what he was painting here. It's funny. She did a sketch of a figure from the Metropolitan Museum sketch right there. And so then a giant sphere comes. He starts to see some of the images, like ghostly images of the Enforcer, version 9 and version 1. And then there's kind of an event horizon. And we have a little bit of Sphere Mage, like the old Info Mage, but now a sphere. I've projected him into the sphere. And here I've got the homage to Daredevil and Elektra. I had been working on a 3D animation of Daredevil and Elektra. Here you have Bullseye and Daredevil fighting. This here is the storm on the Sea of Galilee that was stolen around that time from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which was a big impact on me. I used to go to that Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum all the time. It's quite interesting. And then I just kind of put some highlights of these. This is 2002. I bought a new truck, and I was up in Montreal, and I took a bunch of photos. I was planning to make a graffiti photo book at one point, and then some Matrix style art. I did some Mjolnir stylings here. Then I did a Stormbringer and Mournblade pair of episodes. I think I did them on New Year's Eve of one year and then New Year's Day of the next year, just to kind of tick the box of issues 24 and 25. And then finally, I did the Enforcers Returned 26 years later issue, the red cover. I did some clip art from the various books, kind of like the end papers of this book. Like if you look in here, or like the cover, you see in the cover of this, I've got this drawing that comes from that era, 2006. So 2006, kind of do an homage to all the different drawings, kind of bring them all together, kind of clip art style. But then I took a pass at redrawing them. That's that cover piece. And I made a battle between Cthulhu and all of the villains of the Enforcer comics against all the heroes of the Enforcer comics in this very abstract looking battle. It's kind of you got Info Mage, you've got Silver Surfer, Boba Fett is here. And you've got the different iterations of the Enforcer. And then finally Ariok from the old Dungeons & Dragons Melnibonéan mythos that's out of print shows up. And that's the end. And then we've got a special poster of Roxxon, and then I've got kind of like the index to all of the different issues that I made. So yeah, this is the walk down nostalgia lane. But this is the kind of thing I think that people should do more of these things. Take your kids' drawings and make books out of them. Collect your kids' drawings in buy a hardcover drawing book and collect the drawings that way. I think I've got one right here. I think I've got this one. I think if you just let the kids draw in an actual art book, like I have a ton of these, right? This is some of the ones that I did, like Ulquiorra and Kenpachi Zaraki, Ichigo. And then I think this is one that, this is Bowser Land or something. I think this is one of my son did this one. My daughter did this one. All right, but you have them all in the book. I just made one book where the kids can draw in. And then you just have it captured from Cat by Ines. I don't know what that is. Some crazy Disney kind of sketches. Maybe this is Rain doing these sketches. Batman, Superman, A Weird Robin. Okay. My First Snoopy by Ines. Right. So if you collect the kids' drawings, I think that you can have these as physical media, right? I think making your own physical media is kind of the theme here. Today we've got Wally and Eva. These are levels. I think this is a level of Super Mario Galaxy. So yeah, lots of, it's a great way to collect things. I mean, even for yourself, if you don't have kids, do it for yourself as well. I mean, I think that, if you look at my, my collection here, if just looking through some of this notebooks here, even if you don't have art skills, you can just kind of get some paper, throw it in a book though, because you can have it sort of in a way that's, able to, you can look back on it and say, okay, I've got my drawings together. And it's a way that you can look back at your own works, right? It's a way that you can collect your own composition. Then as you go through it, you may find something in it that's worthy of putting together in a published edition or something that you'd want to share with other people. And it's something that you could go forward with if you were so inclined. Yeah, so and then going back into things like that, I was thinking of maybe putting together that book I showed you earlier. I'm thinking that this may not end up, it may end up as a novel, but some of these books may end up more as a manga. So I think that might be a cool project to put together. I've got these on the table as well. Just collections of, I picked this up in Japan. This is a Bleach collection. It's the actual Shonen Jump, Weekly Jump sort of collection. This was this Hell Arc. It's quite neat, but I always had wanted to own the physical Shonen Jump version. You can see it's on very cheap paper. And I'd always had the reprinted versions, which are quite nice, right? But there was something about having the raw newsprint versions, just raw published, that I thought was interesting. And the tradition goes back. It's a deep tradition. I think some of the earlier ones that I've read, beyond the comics, something like this. This is from 2001. It's a space opera type of comic. But all the way back to the 80s, I mean, thinking of things like Fantastic Four, super sci-fi comic book. And then getting into things like Gantz. Gantz definitely was a huge influence. I think the style of Gantz is very existential dread. Where there is stuck in a world between the living and the dead. You've got those same themes in Bleach as well. Where there's Shinigami from the Soul Society on Earth. And then the other one I was thinking, eventually looking at things like, Chainsaw Man's been out. But just my recent fascination has been more in looking at these storyboard books like Akira. I find that these are quite interesting. the raw lines, the motion. I've got this Akira one. I've also got this is from Evangelion, the rebuild of Evangelion. So I just think that the storyboard work, it really helps you to put together, how would I present this? So, in trying to put together a big work like a multi-paged, a multi-volume saga, let's say a novel saga, I'm wondering if it might be a better format these days and a more collectible format these days, instead of writing it as a massive, novel format. If it was to be written more as a something as a manga, right? There is a place in Island's moment in their story where they would always be eternally beloved together in the bond of these memories. This archipelago of memories across a sea storming against them, they are still engraved, believed, and beloved. These moments, each an endless proof of persistence, they are together beloved, and like some tempered signifying chain, there stand pillars of basalt rock, strong against the raging forces that would have torn them asunder and left them bedailed. So maybe these are kinds of things that have a better expression as bits of texts with drawings. I don't know, what do you guys think? Anyone out there a comic book fan? If so, leave a comment below. I'm going to do some more of these like this. If you want to see some more abstract ones, I do have a podcast that I've been wanting to show you guys, but it's taking me some time to work on. And it's based on a Shinto temple that I visited when I was in Tokyo. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of a preview of it. I actually picked up this book. I had to order it from Amazon Japan, but I had been in Japan, and these are like Shinto temple sites across Japan, and they're rated by their spirit activity. So it's interesting, if you look in the table of contents here, the table of contents rates them as like 10, 20, 25, 30, all the way up to 95% of like, is there active spirits there? Sort of like, is there the chance of having an evil spirit encounter? And one of the ones that I visited was in Tokyo. It's a very small Shinto temple, and it has a great story about it's a story about a bath. I'll tell you the brief story. So the story is, there was maybe in the 1800s, but still late 1800s, enough that it's a time when there were still kind of samurai. People had swords still and things like this. At night, this gentleman would hear someone bathing in his water urn. So he had this water basin in his home, and he would hear this splashing and laughing that would wake him up at night. And he would go out there, and there'd be no one out there. So it's sort of like this ghost or this spirit was haunting this bath demon. And I won't spoil all of the story there, but what he does is he does go out one night, and he hits the bath with his sword. And then a bunch of bad luck happens from that. And then there's sort of a redemption story, because actually that bath, in this concept of the demon, is donated to this Shinto temple. And from then on, it becomes a it's at rest, right? So this idea of, and then I was sort of getting into this idea with this, of all things, but the idea of how something like a terraforming Mars project would work. One of those things that I had done a lot during the lockdown, let's call it, was spent time in the gardens, walking around the gardens. And I was just looking at animals and insects and things like that. We didn't have much to do we had nowhere to go during the pandemic, so a lot of time you could spend doing things like this. And sort of there was a connection there, and I want to put that together in sort of a long format, like a visual format for you guys. So maybe that's something I can do. But yeah, maybe I'll just leave it at that for now. Walk you guys through some collection. I will put out a couple other videos, but I'm going to be away for the month of April, but I'll have some content out for everyone, so please do check in, and I will send you some updates from the road. I'm also putting together like a scuba diving channel as well. As you guys know, we also have a board gaming channel, so I do have a Pontus Fathom hobby channel. You guys can go check that out if anyone's interested in board games. And I will be growing this channel still, so not leaving and not even taking a hiatus. Just maybe I will still put some content out for the next couple weeks, but I won't have the time to do our usual philosophical fare that we've been doing. I've just been really busy with other work. So hopefully you guys like it. If you do are missing something, there's a topic you want to check out, please do go check out our bookstore down below. We've got the Esoteric Dragon Mysteries out there. This was one of the popular series that we did. I'm also putting together the Saturn and the Dragon is one of the topics in here. So the Saturn podcast that we did, but this book, Esoteric Dragon Mysteries, Decoding the Dragon Symbol in Myth and Occult Traditions. You guys can go check the playlist out for that video in the links below. But we talk about the alchemical dragon in George R.R. Martin and J.R.R. Tolkien, Tiamat, the mother of dragons, Saturn and the Dragon, the astrological Saturn and esoteric dragon lore, the Dragon and the Grail, the Holy Grail bloodline, Pendragons and the works of Lawrence Gardner, Dragon and the Cross, the second coming in with the rebuild of Christianity and Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0, the Dragon and Reptilian Origins, and the Dragon and the UFO, JFK 60, Crossfire, Camelot, and the Invisible College. I also have some image here. I put together some AI art that kind of explores the idea of the Dragon and the Cross that you guys can check out. But yeah, this is down in the bookstore below. Also the Katu Journals out of Lovecraft's Providence, collecting in our book on Dune for sure. And you can also see the rest of our podcasts. Like I mentioned, I'm putting together a Saturn specific podcast, but we do have Theosophical Psychoanalysis, Pulp Fantasy and Anime, Conan, Solomon Kane, John Carter of Mars, Evangelion and Bleach, and then Pontus Fathom Podcast Lecture Series 3, Esoteric Anthroposophy and Occulted History, Bruno Tolkien, Kubo, Saturn, Time, Atlantis, and then finally Jungian Alchemy and Horror and Science Fiction, H.P. Lovecraft, Frank Herbert, and Philip K. Dick. Each one of these goes into the podcast that we talked about, references some of the books and other topics that we mentioned, so great collection if you like some of that stuff. This one here has the Lovecraft, Jung's Black Books and Dark Gnosis, Lovecraft's Necronomicon, John Dee and the Picatrix, Cryptic Ruins, Dreams, Symbols from Jung, Dr. Dee and Lovecraft, Lovecraft's Necronomicon, Frank Herbert's Dune, Worms, Water of Life, and Jungian Alchemy. This actually ends up in our Dune Anthroposophy book as well. And we've got the Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, K.W. Jeter, Blade Runner, and Formations of the Unconscious, Philip K. Dick and Ubik, Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, Scanner Darkly, Dystopia, and the Angel of History, and then Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, Politics, Prophets, Sci-Fi from the Black Iron Prison. So I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you all for your support. Like and subscribe below. Leave your comments. I love reading your guys' comments. Let me know what areas of any of these you'd like to see more of a deep dive into. I will put some things together for the next couple weeks, so I won't leave you guys high and dry through April. And looking forward to doing a little bit of scuba diving. So I'll have some videos of that for you guys to share too. So thanks a lot, everyone, for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.